Most people don't realize how fast a flea problem can turn into a full infestation. One day you notice a few scratches, a few tiny bites. Maybe your dog won't stop itching. Maybe your cat suddenly avoids the carpet. Then a week later, the entire house feels contaminated. And the worst part? Most flea products barely work anymore. Sprays smell like chemicals. Expensive treatments last only days. Some powders contain ingredients people don't even want near their pets. And many homeowners end up spending hundreds trying to solve a problem that keeps coming back over and over again. But long before modern flea companies built billion-dollar industries around monthly treatments, farmers, kennel owners, and old-school homeowners used something unbelievably simple. A cheap natural powder that destroys fleas by attacking the one thing they cannot survive without: moisture. And once you understand how it works, you'll see why this old method keeps returning every few years despite being largely ignored by modern pest control advertising. The strange part is, this powder doesn't poison fleas in the traditional way. It works mechanically. That's what makes it so different. Most insects survive because their outer shell contains oils and protective waxes that prevent dehydration. Fleas, ticks, mites, and many tiny pests rely on that protective layer constantly. But this fine mineral powder acts like microscopic blades and sponges at the same time. As insects crawl through it, the particles damage that outer layer and absorb protective oils. The pests slowly dry out and die from dehydration. No complicated neurotoxins. No aggressive synthetic poisons. Just physics and moisture loss. And historically, that made this powder incredibly popular in farms, barns, chicken houses, storage buildings, and animal areas long before modern flea medicine existed. The powder many people are talking about is food-grade diatomaceous earth. And despite the strange name, it's basically made from fossilized microscopic aquatic organisms crushed into an ultra-fine powder. Sounds harmless, because in many ways, it is. To humans and larger animals, food-grade versions are generally considered far safer than many chemical insecticides when used correctly. But to tiny insects, it's devastating. That contrast is exactly why these videos explode online. People love discovering simple low-cost solutions that sound almost too old-fashioned to still work, especially when the alternative is expensive monthly treatments. Now obviously this isn't magic, and it's important to understand what this powder can and cannot do. It works best in dry environments. That's critical. Moisture reduces effectiveness because the powder loses part of its drying action when damp. That's why old farmers often applied it during dry weather or inside sheltered structures where insects traveled repeatedly. And that's also why people who use it incorrectly sometimes think it doesn't work. Application matters a lot. Most flea infestations start in places people rarely think about. Carpet edges, pet bedding, floor crests, baseboards, under furniture, garage corners, outdoor shaded areas. Fleas don't just live on pets. Much of their life cycle happens off the animal completely. Eggs drop into carpets and hidden surfaces. Larvae develop quietly in dark protected zones. Then suddenly the infestation explodes. That's why spraying only the pet often fails. You're fighting the symptom, not the environment. Old-school pest control focused heavily on interrupting the life cycle itself. And that's exactly where mineral powders became useful. A thin dusting in hidden problem areas creates zones insects repeatedly cross. Over time, populations begin collapsing because fleas cannot maintain hydration after repeated exposure. Again, not poison. Dehydration. That distinction matters because it changes how resistance develops. Many insects adapt genetically to chemical pesticides over time, but physical dehydration methods are harder for pests to evolve against. That's one reason some old methods continue surviving generation after generation. Now there's something important most viral videos leave out. You should never use pool-grade diatomaceous earth around pets or inside homes. Only food-grade versions are considered appropriate for these types of uses. That difference matters massively. Pool-grade products are heat-treated differently and should not be inhaled or used the same way. This is exactly why understanding the method matters more than blindly copying internet hacks. Still, once people discover a simple mineral powder may help reduce fleas without drenching homes in harsh chemicals, curiosity spreads fast, especially among pet owners. Because pet owners are emotional buyers. They'll spend almost anything trying to protect animals they love. And unfortunately, many companies know that. That's why flea products became one of the most aggressively marketed sections of the pet industry. Monthly pills, spot treatments, foggers, shampoos, collars, sprays, concentrates, subscription systems, recurring chemical cycles. And sometimes, despite all of it, the fleas still come back. That frustration creates perfect conditions for old-school remedies to go viral online. People start asking, what did people use before all these products existed? And suddenly forgotten methods return. There's also a psychological reason these videos perform so well. Simple solutions feel empowering. When homeowners believe they can solve a problem themselves using cheap materials, fear turns into control. That emotional shift drives huge engagement online, especially during economic pressure when people desperately search for cheaper alternatives. Now let's talk about how this powder is typically used. First, carpets and pet areas should be vacuumed thoroughly. This removes eggs, larvae, dust, and debris while exposing hidden insects. Then a very light dusting of food-grade diatomaceous earth gets applied to targeted areas. Light dusting matters. People often make the mistake of dumping huge piles everywhere. But insects avoid thick visible layers. Fine invisible coatings usually work better because pests continue crossing naturally. Old kennel owners understood this instinctively. The powder often gets brushed lightly into carpet fibers, floor edges, pet bedding surroundings, or cracks where insects travel. Then time does the work. Repeated exposure gradually reduces populations. Vacuuming later removes dead insects and excess powder. Outside, some people apply it around shaded foundations, dog houses, coop areas, or dry outdoor resting zones where fleas and ticks gather. Again, dry conditions matter. Rain destroys effectiveness quickly. Now here's where things get really interesting. Modern science actually supports parts of this old method. Research has shown that diatomaceous earth can reduce certain insect populations through abrasion and dehydration mechanisms. Farmers have even used related approaches for grain storage pest control for years. That's what makes the method believable. It isn't mystical. It's physical science. And honestly, physical science often outlasts trends. There's another reason viewers love these videos. The idea feels hidden. Not secret exactly, but forgotten. And forgotten knowledge has enormous psychological appeal online right now. People are increasingly suspicious of industries built around endless recurring products, especially when simpler alternatives exist. Now obviously, severe infestations may still require professional intervention, and pets with heavy flea exposure may need veterinary-approved treatment too. That's important. No responsible person should pretend one powder magically solves every situation overnight. But reducing environmental populations dramatically can still become a major part of long-term control. And that's why these old mineral methods survived for generations. Not because they were flashy, because they were practical. Now imagine two households. One sprays aggressive chemicals constantly but ignores carpets, cracks, and environmental breeding zones. The fleas return repeatedly. Another household focuses on disrupting the life cycle itself using environmental treatment, cleaning, vacuuming, pet hygiene, and targeted mineral powders. Which strategy sounds more sustainable long-term? That's the question driving millions of views in this niche. People are tired of temporary fixes. They want systems. And old-school methods often focused on systems instead of single miracle products. That's another lesson modern consumers are rediscovering. There's also the safety angle. Many homeowners worry about exposing pets and children to strong chemical residues repeatedly. That fear is growing every year, especially in smaller homes with poor ventilation. That's why pet-safe language becomes incredibly powerful in titles. The moment viewers believe there may be a lower toxicity alternative, clicks explode. Because the emotional fear disappears. And emotionally, Fear reduction is one of the strongest click triggers on YouTube. Now here's something even more fascinating. Some modern commercial pest control products quietly combine old principles with new chemistry. The branding changed. The packaging changed. But many still rely partly on dehydration, environmental disruption, or mechanical insect damage behind the scenes. Old methods never fully disappeared. They just got repackaged. And the internet is now exposing that cycle across almost every industry. That's why hidden remedy videos spread so aggressively online. They trigger a deeper emotional reaction. What else have we been overpaying for? Once viewers start asking that question, they binge-watch entire channels. Now there are important precautions people should know. Even food-grade powders should be applied carefully to avoid excessive airborne dust. Fine particles should not be intentionally inhaled by humans or pets. Ventilation matters. Moderation matters. Responsible application matters. This is another reason old farmers applied thin, controlled layers instead of massive clouds. More isn't always better. Consistency beats excess. And that idea applies to almost every successful old-school method. Simple, controlled, practical. Now let's talk about why fleas became such a massive modern problem in the first place. Indoor heating changed everything. Decades ago, colder seasonal homes interrupted flea cycles more aggressively. Today, many homes maintain stable, warm environments year-round. That creates ideal breeding conditions. Carpets also became common flea reservoirs because fibers protect eggs and larvae deep below the surface. So infestations can survive longer than many people realize. That's why environmental control became more important than ever. Vacuuming, washing fabrics, reducing moisture, treating hidden zones, managing pets properly. Old-school methods worked best as part of a broader strategy, not isolated miracle fixes. And honestly, that's still true today. But the internet prefers simple headlines. This powder kills fleas overnight. That gets clicks. Integrated environmental pest management using dehydration-based mineral particulates does not. So creators simplify the idea dramatically. Sometimes too dramatically. Still, underneath the viral title is a genuinely interesting concept that has survived generations because the underlying science actually makes sense. Tiny insects cannot survive dehydration forever. And humans discovered that long before modern chemical pest control existed. That's why some of the most effective solutions aren't always the newest. Sometimes they're just the oldest methods people stopped talking about. And maybe some industries preferred it that way. If you enjoyed this video, subscribe for more forgotten home remedies, hidden DIY fixes, old-school survival methods, and cheap solutions that still work better than many expensive modern products today.